Okay, picture this: you are sitting around a campfire thousands of years ago. The stars are out, the wolves are howling in the distance, and some bearded storyteller starts whispering about lost cities beneath the waves. Gods who walk among us are monsters lurking in the dark. Now fast forward to today. We have satellites in space, submarines combing the oceans, archaeologists digging in deserts, and guess what? Some of those so-called myths, the wild stories people dismissed as fantasy, turned out to have real truth behind them. Yeah, that is right. Myths were not always just bedtime stories. Some were warnings, some were memories, and some were dead accurate historical records hidden in legend. So today we are diving deep into the top 5 ancient myths that turned out to be true. And trust me, number 1 is so mind-blowing you will never look at ancient stories the same way again. Stick around till the end because I have got a crazy theory tying them all together and you do not want to miss it. Alright, buckle up, grab a torch, and let us crack open some ancient mysteries. Let us start with one of the most famous myths in Western culture, the Trojan War. If you went to school, you probably heard about Homer's Iliad, the legendary poem where Greeks laid siege to the city of Troy. Heroes like Achilles fought in epic duels, and of course, that famous wooden horse was wheeled inside the gates. For centuries, historians shrugged and said, cool story, but it is all made up. Just Greek fanfiction. But then comes the 19th century and a German businessman named Heinrich Schliemann shows up. This guy was obsessed with Homer's stories. Everyone laughed at him when he said, I am going to dig up Troy. But against all odds, in modern-day Turkey, he uncovered the ruins of a massive fortified city. Layer after layer of stone walls, burned debris, and even treasures were discovered. And guess what? They dated back to the exact time Homer wrote about. Historians now agree there really was a city of Troy. It really was destroyed in a war. Maybe there was not a literal half-god Achilles, and maybe no giant horse rolled through the gates, but the myth was rooted in a real catastrophic conflict. Imagine telling your friends, yeah, I am digging up a storybook, and then you actually find it. That is like someone going out tomorrow to hunt for Hogwarts and finding it under Scotland. The Trojan War myth was not pure fiction. It was memory-warped, poetic, and dressed up with gods and heroes, but built on truth. Next up, the Amazons. For centuries, Greek myths told of fierce warrior women who lived beyond the known world, independent, skilled in combat, and feared by men. They were said to cut ties with regular society, fight in battles, and sometimes even match the greatest Greek heroes. Historians rolled their eyes. Sure, they said ancient male fantasy, nothing more. But then archaeology stepped in. In the steppes of Central Asia, in places like modern Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and southern Russia, archaeologists started unearthing graves from the Scythian nomads dating back 2,500 years. Inside were skeletons of women buried with weapons, bows, arrows, spears, even armor. Some showed signs of battle injuries. And these were not rare cases. A significant percentage of warrior graves belonged to women. Turns out the Greeks probably encountered these nomadic tribes, saw their women fighting alongside men, and spun legends about them. Thus, the Amazons were not just myth, they were reflections of real warrior cultures that existed far from Greece. It is kind of like hearing someone describe a biker gang from halfway around the world. You would embellish, exaggerate, maybe add some supernatural flair, and suddenly they are legendary warriors. So yes, the Amazons walked the earth, and they were every bit as fierce as the myth said. Alright, let us switch gears to something nearly every ancient culture talks about: a great flood. You have probably heard of Noah's Ark from the Bible. But here is the wild thing: flood stories pop up everywhere: Mesopotamia, India, China, Native American traditions, even in Aboriginal Australian legends. Coincidence? Probably not. For centuries, scholars thought these were symbolic myths about cleansing or renewal. But modern geology started finding evidence of massive floods at the end of the last ice age around 12,000 years ago. Melting glaciers caused sea levels to rise dramatically. Entire coastlines vanished. Rivers overflowed with catastrophic force. One particularly famous discovery was the Black Sea Deluge hypothesis. Scientists suggest that around 5600 BCE rising Mediterranean waters burst through the Bosporus Strait, flooding the Black Sea basin. Imagine being a farmer on the shore and suddenly your whole world is swallowed by water. That would leave a mark on collective memory, a story your descendants would never forget. And here is the kicker: ancient Mesopotamian tablets like the Epic of Gilgamesh describe almost the exact same flood, down to building a giant boat to save life. That predates the biblical Noah story by over 1,000 years. So maybe humanity was not just spinning stories. Maybe they were remembering a shared trauma, a real flood so massive it scarred our myths forever. And honestly, the idea that myth can preserve memory across thousands of years blows my mind. It is like a prehistoric diary entry passed down through legend. Alright, myth number 4, the Minotaur. In Greek myth, King Minos of Crete kept a terrifying creature, half man half bull, locked in a labyrinth. Every year Athens had to send youths as tribute to be devoured. Enter Theseus, who heroically slays the monster and escapes the maze with the help of Ariadne. Sounds like a wild fairy tale, right? But here is where it gets spooky. On the island of Crete, archaeologists uncovered the ruins of Knossos, a sprawling Bronze Age palace complex. And I mean sprawling. Corridors twisting everywhere, storage rooms like honeycomb staircases that lead to more staircases. To an outsider, it would look like a literal labyrinth. And bulls, they were central to Minoan culture. We have found frescoes of people leaping over bulls, sacred bullhorns carved in stone, and even a bull-headed figure that might have inspired the myth. So while there was not an actual monster lurking in the basement, the story makes sense. Greeks heard tales of this maze-like palace with its bull rituals and wove it into a chilling myth of the Minotaur's labyrinth. It is a reminder that myths often are not total inventions, they are distorted reflections of real cultures. The labyrinth was not imaginary, it was built, it stood, and it still fascinates us today. And finally, let us sail north to the icy seas with the Vikings. According to Norse sagas, Viking navigators could sail even on cloudy days using mysterious sunstones. For centuries, scholars thought, yeah right, magical crystals that reveal the sun, total myth. But then researchers started experimenting. They found that certain crystals like Iceland spar, a form of calcite, can actually polarize light. Even when the sun is hidden behind clouds or just below the horizon, you can hold up the crystal rotated and see a faint pattern that reveals the sun's direction. And guess what? Archaeologists have found pieces of Iceland spar in shipwrecks dating back to the Viking Age. So yes, those sagas were not exaggerating. Vikings really did use optical science centuries before Europeans developed compasses to cross the North Atlantic. Think about it, you are in an open wooden boat, waves smashing, fog rolling in, no GPS, no compass, and you pull out a rock that literally points to the sun. That is not myth, that is genius. Turns out the magic sunstone was real technology hidden in a legend. So there you have it, 5 myths that were not just bedtime stories but breadcrumbs of truth scattered through history. Troy, once thought imaginary, uncovered in the soil of Turkey. Amazon's real warrior women buried with their weapons. Flood myths, echoes of catastrophic events etched into human memory. The Minotaur, born from the very real labyrinth of Knossos. And Viking sunstones, optical science disguised as magic. Here's the big takeaway: myths are not just lies. They are memory wrapped in metaphor, history dressed as story. Ancient people did not have satellites or archives, so they encoded their experiences into tales that lasted millennia. And today, with archaeology and science, we are finally cracking those codes. So next time you hear about a myth, whether it is Atlantis dragons or something even stranger, remember, maybe, just maybe, it is hiding a kernel of truth waiting to be rediscovered. If you enjoyed this journey through legend and reality, hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into history's mysteries, and let me know in the comments, which myth do you think might turn out to be true next? Atlantis, El Dorado, or something we have not even dreamed of? Thanks for watching, and remember, the past is not just history, sometimes it is a legend waiting to come back to life.